The house doesn't belong to you anymore. It's time for the next generation to take over. That's why I sold it to my eldest son and his wife. His wife added, "That's right. Hand over the house and get lost." My own son scoffed at me like I was some old, useless woman. His wife followed his lead, demanding that I leave immediately. As I looked at my eldest son, he appeared almost sinister to me. "Hey, are you even listening?" my daughter-in-law snapped. "This house isn't yours anymore. Pack your things quickly, or else my father will get even angrier." Everything my son said to me felt so cruel, almost as if he was desperate to kick me out of my own home. Does he really want this house that badly? Fine. I'll make their dreams come true. "All right, I'm leaving, just like you asked," I replied. My calm response seemed to take them by surprise, and for a moment, they all fell silent. I walked back inside to gather my belongings, my heart heavy with disappointment. You can have the house, I thought, but you'll never know how much trouble lies ahead. One day, you'll be the one filled with regret. Hi, my name is Zariah. Right now, I work as a kimono dressing instructor, a career I found when a friend introduced me to a job at a kimono shop when I was 19. I met my husband, Beckett, through a mutual friend. He was also a well-known kimono instructor, and even today, he holds quite the reputation. We got married when I was 23, and soon after, we welcomed our first son. 3 years later, we had our second child. After graduating from university, our second son landed a job at a major company and got married 5 years later. On the other hand, our eldest son didn't marry until he was 39, and even then, his personality hadn't matured. He still displayed a sense of laziness and self-indulgence. His wife became the primary breadwinner, while he stayed at home, acting as though he were a house husband. I had thought that once our children were independent, my husband and I could finally enjoy some peace and quiet, but life didn't turn out that way. Our family had its fair share of problems. "Who told you to make this?" My husband's voice snapped me out of my thoughts one morning. "I've told you so many times, I want coffee in the morning," he barked. "But green tea is much healthier," I tried to reason, hoping to calm him down. "I don't care about that. I want coffee, not tea." "Do you not get that?" he shouted, clearly losing his temper. His outbursts have become more frequent lately, and each time I wish I could say how I truly feel. I don't want to live like this anymore. For 40 long years, I've often thought about leaving him, but something always held me back. There was a reason I stayed all these years. When my husband lost his job, it was me who worked tirelessly to support the family. With my savings, I built us a new house, this house. If I had left, he would have gotten the house, and I couldn't stand the thought of that. This home was built with my dreams in mind. From the moment the construction started, I made sure every detail, inside and out, reflected my wishes. I discussed everything with the contractors and made sure my husband had no say because I was the one paying for it. The house was completed after 6 months of hard work. While not everything was exactly as I wanted due to budget constraints, it was still almost perfect. However, it ended up costing more than I had expected, and I had to take out a larger mortgage than planned. Now, at my age, paying off that mortgage is difficult, but it's worth it because this house is my dream come true. I was lost in these thoughts when the intercom rang. "Just a moment," I said as I rushed to answer it. It was Aloan, my eldest son's wife. Aloan works hard to support their household since Wesley, my eldest, stays home. She's a capable woman, but with a sharp, aggressive side, especially towards me. "Is Wesley with you today?" I asked politely, but as usual, she ignored me. "Hello, Aloan, welcome." I greeted her anyway. "Please come inside." Aloan didn't respond, instead glancing around at the house. "This is my new home," I told her, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. "Isn't it beautiful?" She gave a half-hearted smile. "It's quite nice. I wish I could live in a house like this." "You're always welcome here, Aloan," I said, though I meant it differently than what she would soon imply. My husband chimed in from behind me. "Actually, you can live with us, starting today." He said this playfully, but it was clear there was a deeper meaning behind his words. Aloan immediately brightened and leaned into my husband, acting almost like a spoiled child around him. Their relationship has always bothered me, and I couldn't help but wonder how long they've been this close. It made me sick to see them like this. "Get some tea and snacks for Loan," my husband ordered, "and stop being so rude." I silently prepared the tea and sweets, handing them to Loan. She started eating without even acknowledging me, no thank you, or even an itadikamasu, as one might expect. Not a word of gratitude left her mouth. After finishing her tea, she turned to my husband, saying only, "I'm heading back," before walking out without so much as a glance in my direction. Ever since she started coming by more frequently, I've noticed she always acts like this. It's exhausting to deal with, and I can't help but wonder why she keeps visiting. At first, my daughter-in-law Loan only came by once a week, but over time, her visits increased. After 3 months, she was showing up almost every day. Oddly enough, she always came when I wasn't home. It left me wondering, what was the real reason behind her frequent visits? One day, I got a phone call. "Hello, Mom. It's been a while. How have you been?" The voice on the other end was familiar. "Grayson? Of course, I'm fine." "Yes, it has been a long time," I said with relief. It was my second son, Grayson, and unlike my eldest, he's responsible and hardworking. I'm so proud of him for always taking good care of his family. He's been busy with work, so we don't get to see each other often, but he checks in now and then. "So, how's everything going?" he asked. "How's the new house?" "It's comfortable," I replied, "but I've been dealing with a bit of a problem." "Is it about Loan?" he asked, almost knowingly. I was caught off guard. "How did you know?" I asked him, surprised. "I don't have much time, so I'll keep it brief," he said. "But yes, I heard from my brother the other day when he had a bit too much to drink." What Grayson told me next was hard to believe, but in some ways it made perfect sense. A truth I hadn't considered before began to sink in. "Mom, are you okay?" Grayson asked when I fell silent. "I'm fine," I replied after a moment. "Thanks for telling me. That was really useful." His words had sparked something in me, and I had already begun forming a plan. "Grayson, I need your help," I said. I couldn't do this alone, and I knew Grayson would stand by me. The very next day, I started putting my plan into action. I worked on it quietly, taking care of things after work and on my days off, so no one would notice what I was up to. A few days passed. One afternoon, the door opened, and there she was again, Loan, my daughter-in-law. But this time, I couldn't help myself. I greeted her with a sarcastic tone. "Oh, how rare. You're actually here when I'm home." Of course, she ignored my words. Without even acknowledging me, she slipped off her shoes at the entrance and walked straight into the house, as if she owned the place. I watched her coldly, but just then, I heard a familiar voice. "Wow, this really is a beautiful house," Wesley, my eldest son, said as he stepped inside. His behavior mirrored his wife's, no greeting, no pleasantries. He simply took off his shoes and walked in. It was clear that my husband had been expecting them. He came out of the living room with a smile on his face, like he had been waiting for their arrival. "I've been expecting you. Come on, this way," he said as he led them through the house. The three of them acted as if I didn't even exist. My home had an open kitchen that allowed me to see into the living room, so I stood there, watching silently as they all sat down. "This is such a fantastic place," Wesley said, glancing around. "I can already picture Loan cooking in this kitchen." I overheard my husband giving them a tour of the house. "The bathroom and toilet are right here," he explained, leading them from room to room. I trailed behind them, careful to stay out of sight, my suspicion growing with every word they exchanged. As they moved upstairs, my doubts turned into a grim realization. I overheard my husband showing them the master bedroom. "This room has a great view, doesn't it?" he said. "It's spacious, and of course, there's an extra room over there too." "Wow," Loan said, her eyes wide with excitement. "This house is perfect. So, when can we move in?" That was it. Grayson had been right all along. They had been planning this behind my back. They eventually made their way back to the living room, chatting happily, their excitement almost tangible. As soon as they sat down, my husband barked at me. "What are you doing just standing there? Be polite and bring some tea and snacks," he demanded, waving me off like I was some kind of servant. Before I could respond, Eloan chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's okay, Dad. We care about the elderly. Take it easy." "Yeah," Wesley added. "It's normal to slow down when people get older. You should be nicer to her, Dad. After all, she's your wife." I bit my tongue, holding back the storm of words I wanted to say. I quietly prepared tea and snacks, just as they had asked. But not a single word of thanks came from any of them. Instead, they continued chatting and laughing, treating me like I was invisible. A few days later, I came home from work and saw a moving truck parked outside the house. My heart sank. What now? I walked closer and saw my husband talking to one of the movers. The truck was labeled Scott's Moving Center. As I stood there, trying to process what was happening, my eldest son and Eloan suddenly appeared from behind me, acting as if they had been waiting for this very moment. "Is everything ready?" Wesley asked, his voice eager. "Yes, that's right," my husband replied. They exchanged a few more words before all three of them marched right into the house, not even glancing in my direction. I stood frozen for a moment, watching them go inside without a care in the world. I stood outside the house, watching everything unfold. My husband, eldest son, and daughter-in-law huddled together with the mover, discussing their next steps. They seemed thrilled, almost like they couldn't wait to take over what used to be my home. After about half an hour, they all came out of the house, laughing and bowing as they saw off the moving truck. When it was all over, the three of them turned to me with smug expressions, their faces twisted into grim smiles. My husband stepped forward and said, "I need to talk to you. Don't say anything, just answer yes to my question. You don't have the right to refuse, anyway." My eldest son and his wife stood beside him, grinning like they had already won. My husband took a deep breath and continued, "You're too old for this house. It's time for the younger generation to take over." So, I sold it to our son and his wife. Following his words, my daughter-in-law chimed in, "That's right. Now hurry up and get out of here." My heart ached as my husband called me an old woman, and my daughter-in-law gleefully agreed with him. They both sneered at me, telling me to leave as soon as possible, while my eldest son stood behind them, silently approving. Their faces looked twisted, almost evil, and I couldn't believe these were the same people I called my family. Could they really want this house so badly that they'd treat me like this? "Fine. I'll give them what they want." "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll leave, just like you asked." My response seemed to catch them off guard. For a moment, the three of them went silent, unsure of what to say. I ignored them and went back inside the house to gather my belongings. As I packed, my mind raced. "You can have the house," I thought. But you don't know what's coming. You'll never expect the trouble ahead. One day, you'll be the ones filled with regret. I still had feelings for the house, after all the effort I had put into it. But at that moment, none of that mattered anymore. I had to get out of there as quickly as possible. As I carried my things out of the house, I caught a glimpse of their faces. There was something strange about their expressions, almost as if they couldn't believe I was really leaving. It looked like relief, but I knew it was temporary. "Be ready," I muttered under my breath as I walked away. I headed straight to a familiar place. When I arrived, I was greeted with warmth. "Thank you for coming, Mom," my second son, Grayson, said, meeting me at the door. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all that." He quickly took my luggage for me, helping me inside. This was Grayson's home, and the reason I was here today was because he had called me not long ago. He had warned me that my husband was planning to sell our house to my eldest son and his wife. Together, Grayson and I had quietly prepared for this day. Grayson had asked me to move in with him, and that's why I was here now, ready to start a new chapter of my life. "Mom," Grayson said, his expression suddenly serious. "There's something I haven't told you yet." "What is it?" I asked, noticing the shift in his tone. Grayson hesitated for a moment before speaking. "The truth is, Dad and Eloan are having an affair." I froze, stunned by what I was hearing. "What?" I managed to whisper, still in shock. "Yeah," Grayson continued. "I've had my suspicions for a while, but it became clear when I caught them together. I've got proof. Grayson pulled out his phone and showed me a photo, one that clearly revealed the truth. My husband and my daughter-in-law, Aloan, were having an affair. I couldn't believe my eyes, but deep down I realized that it made sense. There had been many odd moments between them, but I had never imagined this. According to Grayson, the affair had started shortly after we moved into the new house. Looking back, it all fit together. Grayson remained calm, despite the painful news. "Mom," he said, "Dad will probably ask you for a divorce in a few days. You should be ready for that." I was amazed at how composed Grayson was, considering the circumstances. If I found out my father was having an affair with my brother's wife, I don't think I'd be able to stay as calm as he was. "You should come up with a plan," Grayson suggested. I thought for a moment and then shared my idea with him. Grayson looked surprised, but then he smiled. "I see. That could work," he said. Sure enough, just a few days later, I got a phone call from my husband. "I've decided to divorce you," he said bluntly. "Sign the divorce papers today." "All right," I replied calmly. "I'll be there later." Everything was falling into place. I had already prepared for this moment, and now all that was left was a final confrontation. I texted Grayson to let him know, and his response was simple: "Good luck." When I arrived back at the house, my husband was waiting at the front door. As soon as he saw me, he hurried over, practically shoving the divorce papers into my hands. "Sign it now," he demanded, like he couldn't wait to be rid of me. I was tired of his behavior, but I kept my cool. I signed the papers, and he was overjoyed. Without wasting a second, he rushed off to the city office to submit them. Just like that, I was legally divorced from my husband. We agreed to discuss the division of property with a lawyer later, but for now, our conversation was over. When I got back to Grayson's house and told him about the divorce, he smiled and said, "Well, now we can just relax and wait." 2 months passed since I had left my old house, and though I was still adjusting to my new life, I knew that I had made the right choice. I received a call from my eldest son one day, and his voice was filled with panic. "I had no idea the monthly loan payment was 360,000 yen, he exclaimed, clearly stressed. I remained calm and responded, "I was the one paying that 360,000 yen each month. Why should I continue paying it now? I don't live there anymore, so the loan is your responsibility now, isn't it?" He didn't seem to understand what I was saying and kept pleading, "Please, do something for me. I can't handle this on my own. All I can say is that you're a grown man now, and you'll have to take care of yourself," I told him before hanging up the phone. Without hesitation, I deleted his number from my contacts. It was time to move on from the past. My second son, Grayson, had been standing beside me during the call, and he couldn't help but laugh. His laughter was contagious, and soon we were both laughing uncontrollably at the absurdity of the situation. The very next day, I came home from work to find my ex-husband, my eldest son, and his wife kneeling on the floor in my second son's living room, begging for money. "Please, lend us some money. We can't survive without financial help," they pleaded. "Grayson, please. We didn't know the loan payments were so high," Aloan wailed. I let out a long sigh. The sight of all three of them, groveling on the floor, was almost too much to handle. My ex-husband finally noticed me standing there and demanded, "Why are you here?" I smiled. "I've been living with Grayson and his family since I left that house." His face turned red with anger. He clearly hadn't expected me to be here, and it frustrated him. "Well, that doesn't matter. What's more important is when I'm going to get my share of the division of property," he snapped. I couldn't help but laugh internally. He had no idea what was coming. "We don't have any money," I said plainly. "Of course we do," he retorted. "When a couple divorces, they're supposed to divide the property." "Sure, but that only applies if you actually own the property," I explained, my tone sharp. "We don't have any property to divide." Even after all of this, my ex-husband still didn't understand what I was telling him. I had to break it down for him again, this time more carefully. "You've been unemployed for a long time," I said. "I paid for all of our living expenses and the mortgage for the house. I could barely cover the necessities, let alone save any money, especially since you spent whatever extra we had on yourself." It was only when I laid it out in such simple terms that the truth finally hit him. He stood there, stunned. unable to respond. And one more thing, I added. I'm going to ask for alimony, so you'd better be prepared for that. Alimony, he stammered, his face turning pale. I wasn't finished. I know about the affair with Aloan. Our son saw it, and even took pictures. He has all the evidence. Grayson pulled out his phone and showed my ex-husband the pictures he had taken. They clearly showed the inappropriate relationship between him and Aloan. My ex-husband looked lost, and he collapsed into a chair. Aloan, upon seeing the photos, burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. My eldest son, who had been standing by her side, grew angrier by the second. His hands shook with rage, while Aloan cried harder and harder. The whole scene was almost laughable, my ex-husband frozen in shock, my daughter-in-law wailing, and my eldest son trembling with fury. It was a ridiculous sight, and I couldn't help but see the humor in it all. Grayson, however, had had enough. He forcibly threw them out of the house and called the police, reporting that people were causing a disturbance outside. Within 10 minutes, the police arrived and quickly arrested my eldest son, who had started getting violent. Aloan, who was still sobbing and mumbling incoherently, was also taken into custody, as was my ex-husband, who remained in a daze. The three of them were escorted to the police station, where they spent the night. After they were released, they were forced to move into a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't long before the tension from their affair came to a head. My eldest son became verbally abusive, hurling insults at both his wife and my ex-husband. The guilt and stress took their toll on my ex-husband, and he eventually fell into a deep depression, unable to work anymore. Aloan, now burdened with taking care of both men, worked herself to the bone from morning until night. On top of everything else, she had to pay alimony to me, which made her life even harder. As for the new house, it was sold. They couldn't afford the mortgage, and selling was their only option. Meanwhile, I had cut all ties with my eldest son, Aloan, and my ex-husband. I would never see those three again, and I had no regrets about that decision. Since then, my life has taken a much better turn. My job as a kimono dresser has flourished, and I've even opened my own store. With things going so well, I've started planning to build my own house again. This time, I'm thinking of asking Grayson and his wife to live with me. I know that with them by my side, the three of us will finally have the happy life we deserve.